With my recent review of the MOZA Racing FSR2 steering wheel and the CM2 Dash, I had an opportunity to get back into the Dash Builder, and there was a specific reason. Using two, I wanted to separate certain information, but it reminded me how it can be a little bit difficult or overwhelming to work with the Pit House software, the Dash Creator, so I figured I'd do a quick tutorial to kind of show you some of the tips and tricks and how to build or design or change your own dashes. So a few things I want to take you through. We have the Pit House software loaded up here. And one thing you'll want is up here in the upper right, you can see it has a tutorial. And if you click on that, you'll see it actually shows you how to do a lot of the things in the Pit House Dash Designer Studio, but it doesn't show you everything. So I went through this and I couldn't even make an RPM gauge fully. So that's why I'm here today, to show you what you can do. The other thing you're going to want to know is at the MOZA website, they have their Dash community where you can actually download dashes. So you can see a bunch of dashes have been uploaded by creators. And if you're proud of your work, you could upload yours so others could use it. So you could download these, and sometimes you'll download them just to see, hey, how did he do these red and blue bars? So you could download it, look at the elements, and figure it out so that you could use it. So sometimes it's for education, or sometimes you just redesign their dash, or in this case, I'm going to show you how to build your own, or at least how it all works. So when we're within the Pit House software, you'll see right here in the upper right, it shows new, and that's how you create a new dashboard. All these are the dashboards that are on my device. All these are the available dashboards that I have, but I'm going to hit new, and it's going to bring up the dashboard creator. Now, I can't show you how to build a perfect dash. I can show you how it works so that you can dive in and do it for yourself. Otherwise, I just upload my dashboard for you. So we'll call this Display 1. And right now, I'm going to resize it so we can all see it. And a couple things we want to do first. Right here, you see the resolution options, like which display. The 480 by 480, I think that's a little round spinning display. The FSR V2 is for the steering wheel display. And the SO9 is the CM2 Dash, the largest display, 1280 by 720. That's what we're going to do here today. They're not interchangeable, but it all works the exact same way. And right now you see nothing. So we're going to go ahead and go here to fit, zoom to fit. And now what we have is a 1280 by 720 black box. And what you see is what you get. Right now this would be my dash. It is completely clear or completely blank of anything. So when we add elements, they'll be done in layers. Layers build upon each other. And we'll show you how that works as well. And then up top here, you have all the things that you can actually do, things you can add. Elements, we're going to call them. Elements that we can add. And then over here on the right are where the parameters for all of those elements are. So up at the top, we have, let's just work right to left. Right here, what we have are pre-done things that you would use, elements, we're going to call them. So for example, let's say that we wanted to add a gear indicator. Right here, we could go to current gear. And it brought up a gear indicator. And just by default, it'll select a box size and it will create a layer. So our first layer of our display is called current gear. The title is over here under parameters. If we change this to just gear indicator, you'll see it changes the name. I misspelled it. And so on. And then we have our first tab of information here under General, which is the XY is the position on the display. The WH, or width and height of the box itself. So right now it's 100 by 100 pixels. We can make it 200 by 200 pixels. And then the box right now is clear other than the text that's in there, the gear indicator itself. But we could change the color. So right here I could pick the color red. And we have a red background. We're going to not do that for this because it would be ugly. We could change the border. So right now there is no border, but we could make it 5 pixels wide. And we could make a red border and turn that on, and you can see what that does. And then you could change it. So right now this box has square corners. We could round them a little bit just for some elegance and put a little 15-degree radius maybe. And you can see it put a little radius curve on the end of the corners. So that shows you the parameters of the box itself whenever you create a new element. And that'll come into play in different ways depending on what you're doing. The next field down is the text itself. So right here you see this N, but it's grayed out. And the reason it's grayed out and I can't change it to a different letter is because we have this telemetry field here. That's what this FX is, or TX is, telemetry. So right now, because that's highlighted orange, it shows that we have attached telemetry, which started when we brought down the current gear. It knows we are doing current gear, but if you click on it, you'll see telemetry data gear. All right? And so the game is going to pull that information into the dash, and when I switch to first, it'll change it to a 1. That's about all you need to know. You can change the font size, so let's make it double the size of that, 100. There you go. You can change the font. They have a bunch of different fonts available, so we could just go to this Moderna. Ooh, that's ugly. Let's not do Moderna. Let's do Furore. That looks okay. And you can change the boldness if you want, just like a text editor. This is just like a text editor. And here we can change the color. Let's say we want it to be blue. There you go. And right now, just like text, we can align it in the center. And we could center it in the middle of our box. And let's go ahead and make that even bigger. Let's make it that big. And it doesn't look very centered, does it? That's the font that's keeping it not perfectly centered. That's okay. And we're pretty much done with that field. So now we've created a gear indicator. And if later in your design you're like, no, you know what? I don't really like that box, or I don't like the color. You could just come back here and say, okay, let's make it kind of a silvery color. Is that better? Yeah, that looks cool. So that shows you how these elements work here. Now, these kind of are all text files. A lot of them are. So like I just added a best lap time. And right there I changed the size of the box just by clicking and dragging it. And then it works just like that gear indicator did, but now we're dealing with a best lap time. And you can see on the left, this layer is above the other layer. If I were to put this above, you'll see the numbers are above that other box. And that's how the layers work. If I wanted to, just for example, to show you the layers, right now the zeros are covering the N. I could click and drag this gear indicator layer and bring it above the best lap time. And now the N is above the 0. Now both of those would be ugly, so we're not going to do that. We're just going to put that over here. You can also see when you're moving boxes around, once you have a second box, you have something to align with. You figure you might be building something. You want it centered or maybe all aligned across the bottom. So what we did is we created best lap time. This is the same thing. Our up and down is our X and Y, the width and height of the box, which you notice it affected the box, but not the text itself, because the text is separate, just like we did before. So if we wanted to fill this with some background color, we could do so, just like we did with the neutral box. Moving on, we're done with general. We're not going to put any background or coloring. The telemetry, you can see it's selected telemetry. And you can see it also put in the format. And if you wanted to change the format to minutes, no hours, you could. We're not going to worry about that right now. We could change the font just like we did before. Let's keep it consistent with that furon, even though I don't like those strikes through the 0. And we could also align it in the center so we know it's going to line up with anything else we do. And we'll put it in the middle in this case. That's fine. And we can change the text color. Maybe we want to match the blue of our thing. So that pretty much shows you everything that you need to know there. Now, how do I know that's the best lap time? It doesn't tell me. It just has a number. Well, over here we have a text editor or a text creator, and I can add a text box. Same thing. I put it in the upper left, 100 by 100 pixel box. All right. But maybe I want to match it to that number. All right. So this number was 423 wide. Let's make our text box the exact same width, 423. And now what that'll allow us to do is line them up perfectly centered, one above the other. See how that worked? It lines up everywhere. In the center, we have a tick mark, and we have a tick mark on both edges. So we know that text is centered perfectly above the number. All right, now, just like the others, we could put a border, we could put background, any of that if we want around the corners. We're not going to. The text itself, so right here on the left, it's called it text. At the top was the title, just like when we did the gear indicator. We're going to call this best lap text. And that just reminds us when we're going through a lot of layers, when we have 20, 30 layers, it's easier to remember what they all do if you title them. And right now, in the field, we're in the text field here. For text, it shows text. Let's change this to say best lap time. And then let's change that font. How's that same font look? That looks pretty cool. Maybe we want to change the color to match. And let's center that text so it looks beautiful. And we'll put it in the middle. Now, notice the distance between them. Because our box size is, we lined it up that way. I mean, we could overlap the boxes. Or we could have made the box shape more appropriate to the size of the text. It'll maintain center. You just need, the boxes are just there to help you arrange things. And they can be made whatever size you need them to be for whatever you're doing. If I made that font really big, well, now it doesn't fit in the box. I better make that box bigger, and it's going to help you just understand where everything is. Okay, let's put it back to there. So now we have covered pre-made functions, and we've also covered text. But text can also be used as a generic way for those pre-made functions as well. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but so here we have our text. And just like the other one, it titled it text by default because that's what we created. We're going to call this gear, IND, just IND. We're going to delete this. I just want to show you something. Okay. And same thing, size and all that doesn't change. We can put a background, all that. None of that changes. What I want to focus on is right here where it says text. Now I can leave the word text. It won't matter in the end. But right here, if I were to click the telemetry, just like we did on the gear indicator, it was pre-done for us. But I can hit telemetry, and I can type in gear, and it's going to show gear. And now, it's going to give me the telemetry, which means, so you can see the format is gear. When I switch to the gears, that's going to switch, just like this one. We created our own version of a gear indicator. So you can do the pre-made or assign your own. No different. One's just a little pre-made. All right, we deleted that lap. Other things I want to show you, just so you know how to dive into this. There are a lot of different things you can create, and a lot of them work differently. So those are all text-driven type. The next one is the track map, which doesn't work in iRacing, but it works in Assetto, Formula One, Race Room, and Project Cars. And it's as simple as that. Same thing. It created a box, and in this case, everything's tied together. So if I were to make this box larger, it's going to make the track map. Stays in ratio, but that's how a track map works, and we're not going to do that right now. I just want to show you that. Gauges, and this is where we're going to spend the most time here today. So I've played with these gauges, and I say play, you have to figure them out. So I'm going to show you how a dial gauge works, and you're going to be able to learn a lot of what we did there and apply it to a linear or a circular gauge. But let's just do the default dial gauge. And by default, it's creating it as a tachometer, just in terms of looks. Now it's tiny, so let's make our tachometer larger. I made the box larger, but did you see how the tach itself didn't grow? It stayed that same size. And that's because we need to adjust our parameters. So let's start things off in that same order. Our layer is now called dial gauge. Let's call it RPM dial gauge. And then we go through the parameters. With the box, we controlled the box, but it didn't affect anything else. We adjusted the position. We can do same thing. We can do a background, but it's on the entire box. Just remember that. This top field is in regards to the box itself, not the dial, not the gauge. Okay? So we've done everything we really need to do there. Moving down. We don't need an effect here. I don't even know what that does. That's okay. Or I haven't needed, I should say. Now, the dial background is the actual background within the rings. So right now it's clear, but I could have made it red if I wanted a red dial. Or I could have even made it some kind of a linear gradient. So we could make it red to black and see how that looks. There you go. That's a cool looking gradient. The border stroke color are for the rings themselves. So if we want to make them a different color, let's say we want to make them a very bold yellow. We could go to there. Oh, I didn't change the color. I have to pick the color. Here, we can just go to a pre-done one there. And we've made the rings yellow. So you can do that. The inner radius is the little circle, so we can change its shape and size just by doing that. And we can change its thickness and so on. All right, outer radius for this one, we can make the circle bigger. Maybe we want it even bigger. And we can make it more bold since it's bigger. We want it to stand out a little more. And that's the dial parameters itself for the background or the dial itself. The next one is the value, and I'm not sure why everything is in the order that they are in. But right now you can see our tack is set to go from 1 to 9. So we really want to go from 0. RPMs start at 0 when the car's off. And let's be a little more high performance and crank this up to 10,000 RPM. And so you can see we've changed this from 1 to 9 to 0 to 10. The value is just showing us where the needle is. And that'll come into play when we tie telemetry to the needle, which is what we're going to need to do right now. So, right here, when we go to telemetry, let me say something really quick. It took me a long time to figure out that the value was the parameter that I needed to put the telemetry on. And you can do that by clicking through everything and alt-tabbing to the game to see what happens, or you could pull up a different dash in order to see how they did it. So for example, if I go to this dashboard here and I click Edit Dashboard, it brought that dashboard up. And what I want to do is I want to go here to this one's RPM dial, okay? And I want to come down here and see how they did it. So that's what I mean by sometimes you will. And what you'll see is the value is here. This one is set to 0. It's just showing the tack at idle. So if I go back to our display and we go back to our dial and we come down here to our value and I put it to 0 like the other one does, you'll see two things happen. The needle's going to move to 0, and so is this bar that's tied to that needle position. And enter. And there we go. The other thing, going back to that cheater dash, or how we're going to learn how to do certain things, is we're on that RPM dial, and whoop, where did it go? I'm on the background. Go to the RPM dial, and then go back down, and you can see the telemetry. This is highlighted here for value, and this is the reason I had to come here, is this part here, divided by 1,000. Because we're doing a tachometer, and where our tachometer says 1, 2, 3 through 10, but it really represents thousands, 1,000, 2,000, that extra value. And the reason I'm showing you that is right now I'm just going to hit Control-C. And we can just get out of here. When I get back to my display, and I go to the value for our needle, and I bring in the telemetry for RPM, there it is. You're going to see it does not show by 1,000. It doesn't know we're building a tack right now, even though we asked for it that way. But it doesn't know our scaling is only 1 through 10. So we actually have to add that same value to it. Whoops, I think that space wasn't there. And that's what I mean about using other dashes to learn how tricks are. Just pull them up in the editor and look how they did edit things and copy it over to your own design. So anyway, what we've done now is we've now made it in thousands instead of ones. Getting back to that real quick, I'm going to put this at 4 again for a different reason. It's really just a demonstration, its position here, because it's being driven by telemetry, not by this number. But I'm going to put it at 4. You can see this yellow bar moved up, and that's going to come back into play in a moment. All right, let's keep moving down the list of parameters real quick. I'm just going to close the ones we've been through. We just finished value. Scale. This is just the start angle in terms of the rotation of this dial, and the sweep angle, how much it encompasses of our 360 degrees. So right now it's tilted to 120. If I want to give it more tilt, rotate it clockwise, I just increase the rotation to 140, and you'll see it rotated it. And if we're going to make a speedometer, maybe we just want it to go across just the top, that would come into play. Getting back to the speedometer, maybe we don't want it to be that wide. Let's make it 180 width. And you can see by playing with this, I can actually adjust just where it sits. And that will be really convenient depending on the type of dash you're building. For a tachometer, the numbers they gave us actually work pretty well. I'm going to stick with that. Moving on, the ticks are the little lines for our RPM gauge. And first things first, we can adjust the color. Let's just go with your yellow theme. It's going to be a little obnoxious, but we can go to yellow. We've changed the big ticks. The major ticks are the big ones. The radius is how big the circle of the ticks are. Let's crank that up to 140. Not quite wide enough. Let's go 160. That looks pretty close. Let's make them longer. Let's make them longer, and let's make them thicker. And the value per division, we're 1 per 1,000, so we're okay there. We don't have to change anything. All right, we've pushed our major ticks out and changed the color. Our minor ticks are still in there, little white ones. So let's go ahead and put them, what was our radius? It was 160. Let's match that and go to 160. And let's make them about 20 long. And let's make them a little bit thicker than that. And we can leave them white in color, or we could change them to match in that same yellow, obnoxious. And the divisions per count, you can see we have 3 ticks between each mark. If I make it 5, it's going to put 5. And it's just how do you want your dash to look. 1 would be a little empty. But 3 actually was nice. They were thinking about a dash RPM when they did that. All right, moving down. We still have a few problems with our dash to fix. The first one is, look at how tiny our needle is with our new tick marks. So the cap, the needle section has everything to do with the needle. The cap radius is this little button in the middle. Let's make it bigger. The needle length, we need that to go out to the ends. Go to 140, see how that looks? Not even close. Let's make that 160. I'd like it to go just beyond our tick marks so that we can actually, there we go. See how it's a little past that tick mark? That'll help our eye kind of catch what it's doing. Go just a little bit bigger. I don't want to touch that bezel. That might be too much. That's fine right there. Okay. The offset is if we wanted to push it, we want it centered, that's fine. But just to show you, if I put it 50, it puts it way out there. We're not doing any of that shenanigans. And then the thickness is just how bold is it. Let's make it much larger. That's way too large. Let's go down to 10. And let's even go down to 8. That looks nice and precise. Okay, and that's how our needle works. Another thing, in this case, we used the needle, the stock needle. I could actually change that. So if I go to pick image, I can use a drawing of a needle if I have a custom one, or maybe I downloaded one. So in this case, let's go to my documents where I've saved some dashes. I downloaded the Huracan dash because I liked a couple features on it, one of it being the needle. And so here's the needle from one of those dashes I downloaded from the MOZA community. And now I have that asset, and I picked the image and it replaced it. Its length is the same, so that should work. Its offset should be fine, but we're gonna have to make that a lot bigger. Let's make that 25. Ooh, maybe even a little bigger. Let's go 30. Oh, that looks nice. Our circle looks round on that little part, and you can see the needle. It's not as bold as our other needle, but it's a cool looking needle. And that shows you how to use an image instead of the default native one. All right, a little more to fix before we can call this an operational dash. Our numbers are very small and they're very inboard, so let's make them much bigger. Make them 25 instead of 10. That might even be small. Let's change that font to, we were using this Furor with the lines through the zeros to be consistent. We'll worry about text color in a minute. Let's get to the radius. We want to push them outward. So let's go to 100. I'd like a little closer to those tick marks. Let's go 115. Oh, that looks nice. And right now we can change the color. Do we want it yellow? That's ugly. We're building an ugly dash. That is an ugly, ugly RPM gauge. All right, we don't have to worry about custom text, ticks. No, we're all done with scale labels. And now, the only thing that's going on left is right now this radial gauge color. So see this yellow line right here? If we didn't use a needle, maybe we want like a bar type. And that's what this is operating, is the radial gauge. Now, if I turn this off, that's that yellow line right here. I can just turn it off. I don't necessarily want that on this tack. But some people do. Or maybe you're not using a needle and you would leave it on. Maybe we make it a different color. Just for example, I wouldn't do this. We can change the radius. Maybe we want it out there in those tick marks. This is just styling that you could do and other features. And again, it's going to grow with that needle. Let's go ahead and put that out there in those. That's not wide enough. Let's go 160. And now that's going to happen out there in our... Actually, I have a reason to go a little narrower. Let's go 140. Perfect. Okay. I have a reason for that, and I'll show you. And then, let's see. So the offset, if we just wanted it to come in later, we could change that. We could make it thicker if we wanted, and so on. Just like all the other things we've been adjusting. Now, optimal style. Some tack gauges have a red line. If we wanted to create a red line, just a bar up at the top, right now it would start at 7 right here, and it would end at 9. Well, we know we were going to make it go to 10 because we want it all through the full red line. And the radius and the thickness we'll come back to in a second. Note, this was called optimal style. Now what we have to do is give it color. So if we go down here to optimal style, you'll see the art color is actually blank. And if we were to make this red for red line, you'll see it now created a red line feature. But now we can adjust its values. Let's push that out there. 140. That's what we did for the green line, so it would actually overlap. The green line would come in to there. Let's make it 160. Now it's on the outer edge, and then let's make it much more noticeable, right? There you go. And now we have a little red line action going on our operational tack. That's pretty much an operational tack. There are other colors and features that we could have added. One thing, I don't like that one thing. Hold on, bear with me. I don't want this. So radial gauge color I'm going to turn off. I don't actually want it following our needle. All right, so there would be an operational tachometer, and you can see all the parameters that we've affected and adjusted. The one thing I'd note also is if you did want to change this into like a speedometer, it's really the same thing. We would have brought in our dial gauge, but we would have changed other parameters along the way. So really quickly, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. You could copy other gauges like I showed you on learning the needle. But like, let's say we want a gauge that went up to 140 miles an hour. So we just made the value from 0 to 140, which would represent like a speedometer instead of a tachometer. All we really need to do is come down here to the major ticks and change it. So right now we're not worried about the radius, that's the circle. What I want to do is change the value per division. Right now it's giving us every number. Let's make that in increments of 10. And you can see now we've changed the scaling. That's probably still a little too much. Maybe we can make it in 20s. And then you would just change your ticks. So in this case, maybe I actually want 20 ticks between 20 and 40. So we go to our minor ticks, and we change that to 20. And that now that's a little obsessive. Let's go ahead and make the radius bigger. All right, so now in this case, I think that doesn't really work so well. Let's knock this back down to 10. And then what I actually want to do is change this back to maybe 10 here as well. And that looks a little bit more. Now, we still have that red line. For the red line, we're not using a tachometer. So we probably don't need the red line anymore. And we could just go to that optimal arc color that we had made red. And we can just go back to transparent with that. And we have restored it looking like a normal speedometer at this point, other than changes in the color that you might want to do and things like that. So that pretty much shows you everything you need to know about doing a dial gauge. I'm not going to go into linear gauges or circular gauges, but the process is the same. You're going to turn the gauge on, you're going to start going through all the parameters and making the necessary adjustments. So other things that we haven't covered, because I want to move on, and I don't want to make this just forever lengthy, we can add an image. And the reason you might want to add an image, and there are a couple. So just like everything else, I added an image. It gave me a new layer. It's called image. In this case, let's call it background. So we're going to give it a title. And now, just like everything else, over here on the right-hand side, we have our X, Y for up and down, width, height, all that stuff, borders. We're going to pick an image. And this time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick this bezel shape right here. And I'm going to hit open. And no, I'm not going to compress it. Now see, we now have a bezel. So what I want to do here is I'm going to change the size. Because it's an image, when I change the size, it should... There we go. It should move with the box, because the box actually is the image size. So what I'm actually going to do is use this as a background to give you an example of how we might use pre-made artwork. Now you see its layer is above the RPM gauge. In order for it to do the effect I want, we need to put it behind the RPM gauge. Whoops. We need to move it behind the RPM gauge. And now it's still too small. So, and you can see the tick mark. So right here, it's centered up and down. I'm looking for centered up and right, left and right, and there it is. I got that crosshairs. I know we're perfectly centered. So if we just keep increasing the size, 340 by 340, how's this look? Nope. 360 by 360, still not quite enough. All right, let's make a bigger jump. 400 by 400. Oh. There we go. And that just shows you how we can use a piece of artwork to go with that tachometer or speedometer, whatever we might do. Another way we could use an image, I called that one background. What I should have called it was background dial. And now let's add another image. Whoops, not a rectangle. Add another image. And this time, we're going to go to this. Now this is just a piece of carbon fiber. I can just stretch it out to the size. And now, in this case, I actually want to make this the background. So I can go to here where we can send it all the way to the back. I don't have to do that click and drag. I can just go send to back. And all of a sudden it's the back. Instead of our black screen, our first layer is now that image. And maybe I feel that's a little bit strong. So maybe we can make the opacity 50. And that makes it just kind of a little, instead of just being a plain black background, it now has a little bit more personality. So that shows you how to use the images. So one thing we haven't covered is you can have multiple screens. So not only can you go up and down with the touch screen, but you go left and right to secondary information. So for example, on this dashboard that we've made here, let's say that we want to scroll right. We can add another screen right here in this upper left corner, add new screen. And so screen 0 is this one, screen 1 is the one we've already done. And on this one, why don't we go ahead and add a track map? So in Assetto Corsa F1 Race Room Project Cars, the track map function works. Unfortunately, it does not work in iRacing. And we can just click and drag this to full screen. And now that is our secondary screen. And we could even do things like add a best lap to this if we wanted to, some other information. Oh, there was a current lap is what I did there. So we can just do everything that we did before. And, you know, you'd clean it up and make it nicer than this, but we could just, and now we have a second screen for that same dashboard configuration. I think that's everything that I wanted to cover. We didn't cover shapes. Shapes work just like the text do, essentially. So let's say instead of using the background functions here for whatever reason, I wanted another division or a line. Let's say I just want a nice red line on my dash for artistic sake. I can just put this rectangle, I create a rectangle, shaped it the way I want, and now I can just do the same thing, put a little fill color on it, and all of a sudden I just have a little bit of styling, and I want to make it a little smaller, and maybe we will cut and paste and make a second one, just a little style to it. Maybe we'll move our tack to be like more like, oh, there we go, something like that. Maybe move that, oh. The box for this is too large is what it is. Oh. We can also go to over here and go to gear indicator and pick it up that way, but something like that. Anyway, you start to get the idea of what we're doing here and how to build a dash. Now, one other thing I do want to cover is maybe you don't feel like designing. Maybe design is too much work. There are other reasons you might want to alter an existing dash. And if you ever are going to alter a dash, take a recommendation from me. It's a good idea to make a copy of whatever you're going to change before you change it. So, for example, let's take, I've used this one in the past, for example, but this dash here, this orange and blue one, why don't we go ahead and, instead of just hitting edit, first thing I'm going to do here is hit copy and give it a moment. And now I have a copy. Formula Racing V6 copy. I'm going to rename this. Actually, I'll rename it later. Let's go ahead and edit it, and I'll show you what I'm thinking. So let me resize this for view. Okay. So one thing that is a problem with the dashes from MOZA is they all come in metric. So kilometers per hour and Celsius for temperatures. And you actually, unless you can convert in your head on the fly, which I can't, I do need to change the miles per hour to speed and temperature like that. So you can take one of the existing dashes like we have here, and you can just change certain parameters. So I know for a fact that this speed setting right here is in kilometers. So if I go here to telemetry, you'll see speed, kilometers per hour. That's not going to work for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete that information. And then I'm going to go to telemetry, and I'm going to type in speed, and I'm going to go speed miles per hour. Unfortunately, not everything can be converted. Some of the tire temps and other things are water temp, and not all things are working in all sims, just like our track map only works in some sims. So anyway, we would change that. The other thing is we could have changed other things. Like I could have said, oh, I think this box here would look better with an orange border to match the other parts of the dash. So I can go ahead and just put a little border color, maybe build up a little more bold on the line, and we will see how that looks when I unhighlight. There we go. You can see we just have a little orange trim. Or maybe I like this dash, but I don't like orange and blue. We could just go real quickly, go to each box. Well, let's just see here. We'll go with a blue and dark blue instead of blue and orange. So I can go to dark blue here, and I can go to that same dark blue here, same dark blue here, same here, and boom, just like that. Now I'd have to make a decision. Do I still like this orange effect up here? Maybe I want to change the number to match that blue that we've now gone to. Maybe I want to change the border of that box color to that same blue. And this estimated lap, not so much I have a problem with the orange, and I don't want blue, it'd be too dark, but maybe we'll just go to red. And so we've made some good changes to this. If we went to the second screen on this, you'll notice it's still in that orange and blue, so maybe we want to change that over to the same color scheme. And I think this gives you an idea of what you can do with the editor. It is a little bit of playing, as I like to call it, or trial and error, some others would call it. But with enough time and just clicking, and remember a couple of things that will save you. Always make a copy so that if you like something, you're not altering it too much. You have a good saved version. And then make sure to use the Control-Z or undo function. If you make a mistake, you just have to undo that mistake and you can fix that. Then when you're all done with one of your dashes, though, we'll go over here to our dash that we built ourselves. And let's just say we are happy. I'm not happy with this one by any means, but let's just say we were. At this point, all we need to do is go here to save and save the dashboard. We titled it when we created it. It's called Display 1. And we can close the editor. And no, we don't want to save the other dashes. We weren't doing anything. And now you'll see right here, Display 1. Now right here, it's sitting on my computer. It is not yet in the dashboard. In order to do that, I have to hit Upload. And give it a moment. You'll see it here on the left now. And we can go ahead and fire up the game. There it is up on our display. We can fire up the game and verify that everything works. So I think that gives you a pretty decent idea, entry point at least, on how to get involved in making your own dash for the MOZA displays. And hopefully it taught you a few tricks and again, a few takeaways. Just remember, you got to kind of play. You got to just kind of click and see what things do. Sometimes open up those other designs. I'll give you another for example. When we look at this dashboard here, I actually took, this was a stock dash, and this, I made a mistake. I didn't make a copy. So I accidentally altered the one that came with it, so I can't even go back or revert to it. But what I did was I took this, originally was just the RPM gauge on its own. I duplicated it, and then I made it into a speedometer as well. I just changed the parameters, changed the angle of where the numbers sat, just like we talked about doing, and now I have a dual gauge. So I was just modifying one of the other designs. Again, remember, save your work, make duplicate copies, all those good things. But yeah, it is a lot of fun, and it can really finish off your rig. So if you're going for a particular look or a particular design, or you have a favorite car, here's another one. I run the BMW M2 all the time. So I built this dashboard because I thought it really, look here, let's go to view again. Oh, I don't know why it's giving me a different view. Oh, because we have multiple screens that I didn't, I cheated. You can see I cheated. I actually wanted this, the numbers from the Lamborghini dash. I just didn't finish cleaning it up. But yeah, here's the main screen, and I created my own background and all sorts of things. It's really endless what you can do, and you can even do tricky things like overlay one thing over another one to let it kind of peek out from the other. You can create artwork that maybe has like a see-through area that you might fit a dash or a dial of some sort into. So it is really endless, and I can't wait to see what kind of ideas and dashboards that other people design. And I'm definitely going to get in there on that dash community and see what's out there and see how they look up on my rig. And I'll be building more. So if you want to see more of these, if you want to see like a next level tutorial, definitely let me know in the comments. Definitely share your concepts and ideas on what you think a dash should have. And definitely let me know if you upload your design and which one it is so I can check it out here. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you can find out when our next video comes out. And thanks for hanging out with me and doing some dash work. This is the Simpit. I'm Sean Cole, and I'll see you on the track.